A captive is an insurance company, and they take on a few different forms. One is a wholly owned captive, where a corporation owns an insurance company and basically cedes its risk to its own company. Then you have group captives, where you have multiple different policyholders, none of which are owned by the same company, that in essence put all of their exposures collectively in aggregate and insure them as a whole. And then you have rent-a-captives, where you basically rent someone else's captive and their surplus to create certain deals. But the beautiful thing about captives is that it really allows you to design what type of program you want, as well as typically pick all the vendors that would be included in that type of a transaction. Well, you know, I think the process in deciding whether a captive works or not simplistically can be looked at as, you know, is there an efficient marketplace? And what we try to do with our clients is find out what is their cost of risk if they go to the marketplace. Is that cost of risk efficient? If it's seen to be too much money, if it doesn't work, if the vendors that they want to use aren't available, then that's a perfect captive candidate. If the market is efficient and there are people that will take that risk off someone's balance sheet, then it probably makes more sense to use the insurance community. But what captives really are used as is a hedge, so that if you want to take a higher deductible, if you want to self-insure in certain areas, and you deem that the market's inefficient in those areas, you can use a captive to cover that and self-insure.
It's a long-term commitment. You have to understand that you have to have a partner. You have to have a risk transfer that you really believe in, that can help you evaluate the decision. This is not a decision that you turn on 1 year and then turn off. It is a decision and a commitment that you are making for a 3 or a 5 year plus period. It will be a good decision when you get all done if you're dealing with those experts that can help you make the decision. But you have to understand it's a very long-term commitment, and when you make it, you need to have confidence that you've made the right decision, because you're going to be living with it for an extended period of time.
There's definitely a lot of frictional costs up front to get into a captive. There's the captive management fee. There's the cost of an LLC. There's excise tax, depending on whether it's domestic in the States or it's an offshore captive, etc. But it does offer some tax acceleration advantages. It definitely creates a lot of stickiness with the customer who's in the captive, because it's typically 3 to 5 year period before you start seeing a return on your investment.
Well, let me start by saying that the beauty of what we're doing right now is that certain things can be edited out. And you have heard it suggested that a captive is not a risk management tool. That is absolutely false. It is one of the greatest risk management tools that you can imagine. Now, when you're dealing with an organization such as risk transfer, you can find a way to transfer the risk, or you can find a way to retain the risk. A captive provides an alternative vehicle of retaining the risk that has considerable options and benefits. Now, with that said, yes, this is another vehicle that is not new to risk transfer, but a vehicle that allows their clients to further benefit in making the decision how much risk to retain, how much administration to retain, and a way to really control some of their captive and their ability to select the risk partners that they have in the transaction. Had the pleasure of working with a company in Ada, Michigan, and they sell a lot of products around the world, and they had a review of how much money they paid for their product's liability product, and they concluded it made very good sense for them to consider a captive, and they set up a captive, and it was not anything that they had given consideration to in the past. And by the way, that's a company called Amway.
If you're in a captive, you have a lot of say in the risk management component. We already mentioned vendor selection, such as who the third-party administrator is, who administers the claims, the loss control component, surveillance, and the like. Because the owner of the captive has skin in the game, they're taking risks, they have a say in exactly who they choose, whether it's bundled services with the fronting carrier, or it's a decision they need to make because they're basically the carrier in this case. They have a say in basically who provides the services. I think following the financial transactions of the captive may be a little bit more burdensome from an administrative standpoint, but outside of that, typically within any captive, there's a very strong captive manager, whether it's an agency captive or a group captive. There's somebody behind the scenes, such as a risk transfer, keeping an eye on how everything's flowing in the transaction. So whether you're on a straight guaranteed cost or a loss-sensitive plan, quite frankly, I think the captive's not going to add any other administrative burden other than the financial transactions a little different than the norm.
Really, it's how much administration you want to take on. You know, if you're IBM and you want to insure your own risk and start your own insurance company, you probably want to go A to Z and control everything. If you're one of our typical insureds, then you might want to, choose the claims vendor, you might want to choose loss control, you might want to have nothing to do with any of the administration, but the beauty about captives is like any self-insurance plan, it's your choice.